So you're looking for unique and easy ornaments this holiday season? Today I want to share with you how you can use pouring medium, some mixed media, objects, chipboard, and a lot of other things to come together to create beautiful and unique holiday ornaments. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is what our bases are. And our bases that we're using today are chipboard. And these chipboard pieces are just offcuts from books and other projects that I've been doing. So I basically cut them all into little squares, and I thought they'd be perfect for using for ornaments. The key with this is to get a good quality chipboard. Yes, you could probably use packaging materials and other things, but you might get a lot more warping, which is why I like using the higher quality chipboard. I'll link below the chipboard that I'm using just so that you know exactly which one to purchase to get the same results as I'm getting today. So first thing we're gonna do is add some matte medium to our bases. And you might be wondering why you want to do this. First of all, it's gonna seal in the chipboard. This means that when we start adding in other mediums on top, it's not gonna absorb into the surface. It's gonna sit on top. And that is pretty key to making sure that we get a good result with this. And we're going to be doing both sides of this chipboard. I'm just going to start with the one side, and when it dries, I'm going to move on to the other side. And again, you don't need to have a super thick layer. It just needs to be like a thin layer that basically covers the surface. By sealing this in, it's also going to prevent anything from the chipboard that might not be great for your paint from leaching in. And so this is just a way of protecting both the chipboard from too much absorption, and that way it won't buckle, but it's also a way of protecting your project as well too, and your paints. I do this with any sort of birch boards that I use for art or anything else. It does make a really big difference on the final result. And that was a tip that I got from a professional artist who does most of her work on birch panels. You can seal it in and then you don't have any worries. And so you might notice that I'm getting a little bit of warping, and that's because of only adding medium to one side. So you can see why we want to do this, because if we didn't, we'd end up having warping like this on our ornaments, and we don't want to have warped ornaments. So basically I'm flipping all these over and then doing the other sides as well. Now that I've added that layer of medium on the back, you can see that we no longer have warping. And this applies to any piece of work that you do. If you find that you're working on chipboard or something else and you're getting warping, add in a layer of medium, add in a layer of paint to the back, and it's going to help it straighten back up because this is going to have the same amount of moisture in both sides of the chipboard. And now from here, we're going to want to add in a little bit of gesso. And the reason we want to add gesso is we want to try to brighten up these pieces. Because of the nature of pouring medium, and some of the mediums I'll be using today, they are semi-transparent. And so whatever color that's going to be in behind is going to really affect the amount of light that you see in your paint itself. This will also give tooth to the surface as well too, and that's going to really help that pouring medium and the other mediums that we're adding to stick to these chipboard pieces. And this is also another way you can strengthen them a little bit. So by the time we add in our first layer of paint, they're going to be fairly strong. They're going to have a couple good layers of mediums and gesso on top of them, and they're just going to work so much better this way. And so the medium actually does help this gesso to move a little bit further on these. It just kind of helps it spread a little bit more evenly, and that's the other benefit of adding the matte medium on top, is that you're just going to be able to get your gesso to work a little bit more smoothly on the surface. Just want to try to create a nice bright surface so that all of our beautiful colors that we're adding with the paint pouring will shine through just beautifully onto the surface. So you want to make sure these pieces are fully dry, and you want to make sure that they're bone dry, they don't feel cold, they just feel room temperature before we look at adding anything else to them. And so this is where it's going to get a tiny bit tricky, because I want to show you how you can tape these. And what we want to do is we want to have a little bit of a ridge on them, because we're using pouring medium can be pretty messy. So by basically creating a bit of a ledge to these, and this is why you would usually use canvases, but because we're working on such a small area, we're going to run with tape. And you're trying to get this as tight as you can. So what I do is I usually press along the bottom so it is fully adhered, and then I try to create almost a little ridge there. And this is going to be a little bit more complex. I've never done this on something this small before, or this thin before. So this is going to be a little bit of an experiment. As I've said, this is not how I usually do this. I usually do these ones on canvas, or I do these on birch board. So the boards are really, really strong. They're really, really stable, and this is not stable at all. So I'm just going to add in my tape, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to try to make this a little bit stronger. And you want to make sure you're using good tape. Don't use dollar store tape. Go get yourself the good Scotch tape. I've taught enough classes where sometimes the organization will give me cheap tape, and oh, you can tell because you can't get it to actually go around twice around anything, and it is very frustrating to use, and it doesn't stay. and it will actually also pull up your paint. So now you can see the back looks pretty ugly, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically just rub that with my hand. And so you want to make sure you have a really good seal. So you can see in this corner, I don't necessarily have the best seal, but that's okay. We're just going to run with it. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure you have a really strong, really square, and you got to watch those corners too. You don't want to pull in those corners. You want to make sure you have a nice square that you're going to be able to get your medium into all those little spots. Where this is where I'd almost use a thinner tape just to make sure that you end up with a really good result. So that's basically how you tape one of these things. I'm going to tape a few more, and then I'll come back and show you basically how we can add in our medium. So when I'm doing paint pouring, I always wear gloves. This stuff is so sticky. You're not going to get off your hands. If you do get on your hands, it's going to be there for days until it finally scrubs off. You can use a little bit of alcohol, that will help, but it's going to be more challenging just to get it off. So what I'm going to do is just show you quickly how you can mix a little bit of pouring medium with color that you like. So basically I'm using the Liquitex pouring medium here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a little bit of paint. So I would suggest using a fluid acrylic or a high flow acrylic like this golden fluid acrylic. You want something a little bit more translucent. There's Dr. P.H. Martin's India inks. And I'm only adding in a few drops to this because I am using a high flow paint. Basically this is almost all pigment. It's very little filler. If you're using craft paint, if you're using other paints, you are going to need to work a lot harder and you have to add a lot more paint to get the same effect. And you can see that I'm just slowly stirring. If you do stir too quickly, what you're going to run into is you're going to get tons of bubbles in your piece, and that's not what you're looking for. But you do want to try to get a cohesive mix to this. And you'll notice that this is not a super dark black. That is fine, because what ends up happening is that because of the nature of the Liquitex pouring medium, you saw that when I poured it, it was pretty cloudy. It's going to darken as it dries because the medium's going to become transparent and all you're going to see is the color. So as much as this looks really, really light, it's going to be quite dark when I apply it. So with this first pour, I'm just going to add in a layer pouring medium just straight onto the surface. And so this looks not very dark, but it is going to dry quite a deep black color. And that's the thing, is you're always going to have a little bit of a mystery as you work on these. Because just again, as they dry and as they move, you're going to see a different result with this. So then this is also where you can go along and play with a little bit of color. You can also go and add in a little bit of teal and other colors to this as well. I'm going to play around with a little bit of a few different colors. And it's nice when they're in squeeze bottles because they're just a little bit easier to control, but they are harder to mix once you've kind of put them away for a while and you're looking at trying to add in a little bit more color again. And this is also where you can tip it and play with it. You can decide if you like it where it is. You can also take things like a bamboo stick, play around with how it looks on your tiny little ornament. I'm making these into like tiny little works of art. So I want to make that as squiggly as I can. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of the silver, come back in again with a little bit more of the blue. And depending on the weight of the pigment, it's either going to drop or it's going to stay where it is. It kind of depends on what you're using and the pigment itself. I find the darker colors tend to drop. So these lighter colors should stay nicely on top of this. I do like leaving some of the blank spaces in here, but I do want to come in with a little bit of this Pabio Moon. So these are an oil-based medium, and I like to give them a really good stir before I add them, and they're just going to change everything about the surface. And so I'm just adding in like tiny little bits of this. And you can see that as it's reacting to the medium, it's pooling and moving and doing different things. I'm not adding a lot, but you can see the effect that it's making on the surface. And this is also where you can play around with pushing this. You could also tilt it. Like, there's no reason I couldn't just pick this thing up and tilt it, but I want to try to control this a little bit more. You can see that one from just being like one really tiny area to one really large area. So this is the thing, is those Pabio Moon mediums do make a big change and do some really interesting things on pouring medium. And this is the thing about pouring medium too, is every time you add something, it changes something. So it's going to look different. And as I kind of tease them around, you can see they're even like just falling in behind, because that oil is going to stick to the very top. So I like that. I think that's going to be fun. This is just like, again, this is just little ideas for ornaments. I'm just going to set this aside. I'm going to work on my next piece. So with this guy, I think I want to do just a teeny tiny dirty pour. And if you're not that familiar with pouring medium, a dirty pour is basically just adding all the colors together in a cup and adding it onto the surface. So this gives you some very interesting results. Because these canvases are pretty tiny, I got to keep them pretty small. So I'm going to add in like a little bit of blue. I'm going to add in a little bit of white, a little bit of this cherry red India ink. So this is going to be a little bit more transparent. So we'll see how this ends up working on the surface. And maybe we'll go back to adding in a little bit of the stainless steel. Add a little bit of shimmer in there. Go back in with a little bit of white. Go back in there with like a little bit of blue. Maybe just add in just a touch of black. We'll see if that works or if that's just too much. Again, I don't want to go too many colors. I think I want to just stick with the reds and the blues and the purples. Maybe go a little bit more white, a little bit more teal. What I want to do is just add in a little bit of the white onto the surface. I don't want a ton. I just want enough to kind of cover the bottom of it, because what that's going to do is it's going to help us get a really nice fluid pour, and it's going to allow everything to move really, really nicely. So you can see that you can manipulate that paint quite a bit. I've been mostly using just my Liquitex pouring medium. It is the best medium. It is the thickest of the mediums. You're going to get the best results with that. For me, often when I'm teaching, some of the organizations I work for, they are on a bit of a budget. So that's when I use the Demco pouring medium. But stay away from Artist Loft medium. You might as well just water down your paint and pour it on, because it's really not helping you much. And so now I'm going to add in my dirty pour across my surface. I'm not sure what I think of that. I'm not sure if I'm loving the colors. The black's kind of cool in there, but it's just a small surface that sometimes I find I do struggle a little bit with like getting the right look to it. Ooh, that's kind of looking kind of neat. So that can end up being like a very interesting little ornament as well too. This doesn't necessarily have to be amazing all the time. Or you start with a base like this, you go, well, I like that, but I'm not really loving some of the things that are going on. So maybe I'm going to go in and add in a few other mediums to this. So this is where you can drop in some little rocks. This is one of the things I do a lot in my pouring medium, is just, I love adding rocks. I don't know why. It makes me happy. So sometimes I feel like it can just bring the eye through the painting, and I love mixed media. So I think sometimes it's just one of those things that can just really bring something interesting into your piece. And so this is also where I could come in and add in a little bit of one color or two colors, and that's just going to push everything else out. I need to get a bit of that little bit of that stainless steel color. You see that's already changing how this little guy is looking. And this is again where we can pull things out, we can play with it, and then just maybe create the swirls or the look that we want. And so we can end up having areas that end up being a bit more one color over the other, or you just run into like you want to have a stronger band of a particular color. I really kind of want to accentuate the blue in here. I find dirty pours are kind of hit and miss, and I've never done them on such a small surface. I find those pours work a little bit better when you have a little bit more space. So for this next one, I'm going to add in some white. I'm going to try to move that around a little bit. I just want to be able to get it all the way to the edges. I'm okay if it's not as much in the center, because I really do want to make sure that the edges are good. I'm playing around with some blues and some turquoises and just some different colors. I'm just going to keep adding in colors and adding in colors. Some of these ones I think had quite a bit of silicone in them because they're moving really, really interesting. So that's another thing, is you can always add silicone in. I would use high-grade silicone. I'm going to add the one that I use in the description below, just so that you have that. Okay, let's play around with this and see what we got. They're kind of overlapping, they're moving. I'm gonna see what we can get. So sometimes it feels like you have to really move them, and that can be pretty scary. But in this case, I'm looking for something a little bit more specific this time. I'm looking for like a very soft background. So now I'm going to be very careful, and I am placing my image on top. You have to be very careful with this because you don't want it to fall underneath, and it's going to curl a little bit just because it's, again, we're adding wet on top of this paper, right? You might get a touch of pouring medium on your image and then just take something very gently and pull that off. And when this one's partially set, I'm going to come back to it and finish it off. But you can see now we've created a scene with a polar bear, and we've added in some different inclusions to this than we normally would in a paint pour. So this shows that you don't have to just stick with a paint pour. I could have also done this when it was dry. I just wanted to show it to you wet just to see what would happen, because I've never actually tried it on a wet surface. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to try. And so with this one, I'm going to play around with a slightly different technique, which is a lot of really thin layers. And so I'm going to start by adding in some white. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of blue. I'm going to add in a little bit of red. And we're just going to move those around just a touch. I'm going to add in some other blues. Throw a bit of copper into the mix. Go back to my white. I'm going to come back and add in a little bit of and just a touch of the green gold. So this is where we can play a lot with layering, and then we're going to end up with some really interesting things. Like you can see, I'm already getting cells from some of the blue colors I've been using. Add a little bit of the iridescent gold. Go back to that green gold to create little areas of interesting colors. So you can see that you can mix a lot of colors that probably shouldn't go all that well together, all in one background if you're careful about it. Let's try to go for straight lines, and this kind of takes on a life of its own. And this is what you're going to notice about pouring mediums, that it will take on a life of its own. It's going to do some interesting things, and you're going to be like, oh, well, I didn't expect that, and I didn't expect this. But in the end, it's going to end up creating a really pretty piece, right? So it's just kind of playing around and figuring out what you like and don't like. And sometimes it's just better not to try to control it too much. It's just seeing what will be. So with this one that had the little paper pieces in it, I have let it fully dry. You don't have to let it necessarily fully cure. The key is you want to have this layer mostly set, or at least cured enough so that the color that you're adding on top does not meld with it. So you want to have a certain amount of separation in these layers. So to finish off this one, all you need to do is basically just pour some of the clear medium on top. And you might be going, well, that's gone completely cloudy. Yes, it has. It's going to dry perfectly clear. And so one other way I like to use pouring medium is I'll often use it on projects where I'm not even doing pours. I'm just using it as a sealant, just to be able to give it a really shiny finish, to be able to give it a really hard surface. And then this is where you can see where it's more cloudy on the areas where it's thicker, a little less cloudy on the areas that are thinner. And so now what I'm going to do is come in with a tiny bit of glitter, because I want to have a tiny bit of shine in the sky. Make it maybe look like there's a little bit of snow falling, maybe a little glitter. You could add in as much or as little as you really feel. I'm going to let that dry for another day or so, and I'll be able to pull off the masking tape. So let's pull some of the masking tape off of some of our creations here. So the easiest way to do this is, again, leave it till dry for a day or two. I like leaving them 2 to 3 days. I'm in a fairly dry climate, so it usually doesn't take much longer than that, but I like giving it a little bit of extra time. Make sure everything is fully cured. Everything is going to be completely set. And it also means that when you pull off your masking tape, it's not going to pour your medium off. If your medium hasn't fully dried, the masking tape has the ability to pull it off the surface, and then you can end up ruining your piece. And so that's one thing I want to avoid here, which is why I'm taking a little bit more time just to make sure that I have a really good cure before removing these. And it's as simple as that. Just pull it all off like so, and then you're pretty much with a finished piece. So once you have these completed, you'll notice that the colors have all really deepened. So all of these have darkened, all of them have changed a bit depending on the medium that's been added into them. And they're very hard and they're very shiny. So that's a really great aspect of them. But you'll notice that some of them end up having a lot of these little rims. And we're going to want to clean these up just so that they work really nicely as ornaments. So the ones that have a bit more of an edge, what I like to do where I can is just basically put them on their side. And it's hard to get a ruler in here to fix it. So I usually just try to do the best I can. You'll notice that the moment you pull some of that medium off, you are going to get a more dull area. And that's just kind of how it goes. The other option is you can come in with a pair of scissors. In this case, this is actually probably the easier way of doing it. Yeah, that's working better. This is a little bit easier, a little bit more control, especially because you're working with such a weird angle. And you can see by just cleaning up those edges, that's just a nice way of being able to just tidy up. That just makes them look a lot cleaner and more like a finished piece. So let's talk about finishing touches. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in like basically a layer of paint to the edges. And so I could do this in black if I wanted to. And because this is a Christmas ornament, I want to try to create a little bit more variation. So I want to try to add in a little bit of this brass color. It's nice to add a little bit of a nice clean edge to this because you can see a little bit of the white. So if we can kind of clean up some of the white that we have there and just have that a little bit tidier, that's just going to have a really nice finishing touch to this project. That's basically all you need to do to finish off all the edges and the back of your ornaments. So now we need to look a way of adding a hole in this so we can hang this. So I'm going to be adding a hole using my We Are Memory Keepers Crocodile. This is a little bit more robust than some of the other hole punches that I have. And you have to make a decision whether or not you want it straight, if you want it at an angle. I kind of like the angle with these little cells down there. So I'm just going to punch a hole. I happen to have a piece of gold twine that I think came with a package. I keep all sorts of packaging. I find that you never know when you'll need it for your Christmas ornaments or other things. Well, I think what I want to do just to make this a little bit nicer looking is I'm going to thread it through like so. And then that should make it just a tiny bit more secure. And then I'm just going to tie my little loop at the end. And there we go. We have one completed ornament. So you can see it doesn't take very long to create a lot of really gorgeous ornaments. And so I hope you try this yourself, that you give these techniques a try. They are very shiny, they're very beautiful. I like that they actually have a lot of gleam on the surface. That means they're gonna really reflect the light on a Christmas tree really, really beautifully. So I hope you've enjoyed this process of playing around with paint pouring, with chipboard, with ephemera, and other things that you can put together to create really beautiful ornaments. And I hope that you've learned something new today from this project. And if you have, if you could just leave a comment below, I would love to start a conversation with you, understand that things are working for you, if you have any questions about what I shared today, and any suggestions for any new videos that you would like to see. I always love hearing from you and just hearing your thoughts and your suggestions. And if you've enjoyed this video, if you could like, subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you're looking for another idea about how to make ornaments, click here. This is one that I did a couple years ago about how to use alcohol inks with ornaments, and it's been quite popular. So I thought you'd really enjoy that video. So I'll see you there.